Everyone. So excited to be on this call with you today. We're really excited to have SOCAP here. Kate, missed hugging everyone, so fun. Great, okay, so welcome. We're gonna go ahead and start with our traditional threshold moment. Ray, if you wanna take us to our image. So I picked this image because it was just a stunning, gorgeous winter image. So we always want to take a moment at the start of our calls to take a deep breath and center ourselves. We're really grateful that everyone here has joined us today, that you made time to explore and reflect on SOCAP with us. Let's take about 30 seconds to just appreciate this time and enjoy this uh, beautiful winter wonderland and this imagining being in this secluded, peaceful cabin somewhere far in the woods. Awesome. Okay. I hope that was beneficial for everyone.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Missy. Just want to give a shout out to our wonderful team. You just heard from Missy. You'll hear from Stephanie Brady later on this call. My colleague Sarah Joy Pond is also in the audience. Encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat, say hello. Really excited for this conversation as we get some behind the scenes information from the SOCAP team. I want to share a little bit about commuters.org. We are a membership organization. I see several members of the crowd, so hello. Thank you for supporting us. Stephanie will talk a little bit about one of our membership programs, Trailblazers, which SOCAP is part of. We also have advisory services, client-based work. We can help you with your convening end-to-end. And we also host community events like this one, where we bring folks together to learn about things in the convening space. Want to share an opportunity for everyone to join us for a private one-on-one consultation. They are free. They're hosted by Sarah Joy Pond, and it's an opportunity to get some one-on-one support with your convening. We also have a feedback survey for this call and want to just give you the link in advance. We'll share it again later on, but definitely want to hear from you what you enjoyed about the call, what we could change, and also what you want to hear from next. Also wanted to share that in January 2021, our next call is a year of COVID, sharing lessons learned from a year of convening virtually. So we'll talk about some of our lessons learned from the last year, and we'll also have some insights from the SKOL team. So we're grateful for them for sharing their expertise. And for our time today, we're here during our opening. We're going to pass it off to Kate and Carrie shortly to talk about SOCAP 2020. We'll have a connection moment to give folks an opportunity to chat with each other in smaller groups. We'll come back for a Q&A discussion with the larger group, so you can ask Kate and Carrie some of the questions that come up from the presentation, and then we'll have a 5-minute closing. I will pass it off to my colleague Stephanie Brady, who is the steward of the Trailblazer community.
Thank you, Ray. And again, just want to note all the links that Ray shared. Missy has posted in the chat. So please, from our consultation scheduling and then the survey, make note of that. But I am pleased to, uphold space for an amazing membership group we have at Conveners called Trailblazers. They really are ecosystem stewards. And they're really brought together to sort of have this special connection of peer learning, best practice discussion. They also do workshop challenges and resources exchange, really about any ideas or opportunities or challenges they're having. And also just to create advisory perspective for us. They are stewards and support key programs at conveners.org, and we are grateful for their support and their thought leadership across the sector. With that, I do want to recognize our Trailblazers. As Ray mentioned, certainly intentional media, SOCAP is one of those, as well as SKOL. So Jill, Phil, thanks. We appreciate you being on the call as well. But it's a wide variety of global leaders. You have from Gratitude Railroad to Maverick to Net Impact, a number of them here that really are very, very special. And I want to just encourage anyone who's interested in learning a little bit more about Trailblazers, please reach out to me directly. Stephanie at conveners.org. I'll pop in my email in the chat. So if you want any more information, we've got some exciting new programs and engagement opportunities for Trailblazers coming up in 2021 that you might want to get to know about. So thank you, Ray. I already did that. Fantastic. With that, I have the pleasure to introduce one of our Trailblazers, Intentional Media, and the amazing team behind that. You have Kate Byrne, President of SOCAP Global and Intentional Media, and Carrie Hansen, Vice President of SOCAP. And, you know, this is the team that did the heavy lifting, that all the details they will share today. And one of the things I just want to let you know that we admire about Intentional, and that's mirrored in our membership and our Trailblazers specifically, is our belief to really share what we've learned, and the transparency that Kate and Carrie will reveal today really is very appreciated, to really give you the behind the scenes and the inside scoop that we normally wouldn't get without this gathering of the conveners community. So we thank you all for joining, and I'll turn it over to Kate and Kari.
I'm so good at that now, at muting myself. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much. We just want to say, you know, we understand you always have a place to be, and we're just glad that you chose to spend this time with us this morning. It was quite a year for all of us. And so what we're going to do is provide an overview of just sort of SOCAP historical super top line, and then talk specifically in audience, sponsorship, marketing, content, and production. Because I thought, well, when we were looking at it, these were the pieces that we were really trying to unpack a bit. SOCAP overall was started back in 2008. Phil has been there with us since 2009. A number of you have, and it was really built in response to, one, the creation, the very initiation of impact investing, but also a recession. And there were a group of people that said, you know what, money is can be a force for good. And how can we actually create exponential social change and social justice that philanthropy alone can't? And so they created SOCAP, which normally is a big, long event. The thing that I think is really cool about it is, to me, it is built for the community, by the community. And we leverage all of our resources to continue to fuel that community. And we'll talk a little bit about how we're kind of doing a shift from there. If you let's hit the next slide. So one of the things that we had to do because of COVID, and I promise I'll share the mic with Carrie definitely, is we recognized, you know, we were this large in-person, it was our crown jewel of the company. And Intentional itself has SOCAP, which is for social entrepreneurs, impact investing, the entire ecosystem. We have Total Impact, was really to help educate and indoctrinate and get those who are more curious rather than converted, who are in the institutional and traditional capital allocation space, family offices, family foundations and such. And then we also really want to empower and make sure that the companies that people are investing in are also purpose-driven and purpose-aligned. So that's Conscious Company. Everyone now comes under one large tent. We call it the big tent because we feel you can always make it larger, larger, larger. That is our intention. So if you can imagine, we are going great guns, and oh my gosh, 2020 starts ahead, and we were well on our way. We'll get into those specifics a little bit, but that's a teaser. And then COVID happens. So where we had been was in person. We had 35, somewhere anywhere between 3,200 to 3,500, sometimes 3,600. We did really roughly 4.5 days, 10 themes. Carrie will do a deep dive into how we do that. 800 speakers. Yes, it's a lot. And then Mac Mama number of 170 sessions. All of a sudden, we realize, oh my gosh, do we, don't we? When I was at that meeting I mentioned earlier, for those who were on the call, and I heard Skull was going virtual, I knew we had to go virtual, period, just because it made sense. And being a leader in the phase, I thought we knew we needed to start going more virtual anyway. So we hosted on 2 platforms. We had over 4,000 participants. We did 5.5 days, including a Sunday, 10 themes, fewer speakers. And then fewer speakers, but more sessions. Let's go to the next one. And Carrie, anything right there you want to add?
I think what I would just mention here in particular, as we look at the last two, 800 and 170 and 712 and 244, is that a lot of this is based on doing an ecosystem partnership piece. And this 244 sessions, we also decided that we were going to open up the platform for many of the other organizations and entities that are in the impact ecosystem, and said, hey, we're pivoting, we have to do this, we're going to have a platform. We know this is a really tough time. Are you interested in putting up some content as well as part of that? And so that 244 sessions represents a number of our ecosystem partners taking advantage of that and doing sessions pre-SOCAP and then post-SOCAP, and SOCAP being like those 3 main days that we do and run our main stage.
Right. So here come the critical stats. Hold your breath, won't you? All right. So, the audience, we did a lot, to Carrie's point. One of the reasons because we've been around as long as we have, we did want to take that leadership role in helping others, lift others up. That's always been a big part of us with regards to the voices in the community. So we wanted to make sure that we did the same for the broader based convening community as well. We created a specific SOCAPvirtual.com website that people were able to go to. We had, we were really excited with the number of folks who attended the main stage audience and the length of time that they stayed. So every morning we had it was 2.5 to 3 hours. So when you do the math on that, minutes average visit time at the main stage, people stayed. When they came, they nestled in and they stayed. One of the reasons why we liked the platform that we chose, they were extraordinarily engaged. In fact, this is probably one of the things that I would say, really a lot of people have commented about, because, when you're sitting at a conference and you want to talk and say, oh my God, do you believe that? Blah, blah. And people turn around and hush you. Well, you could do that and you wouldn't be hushed. Plus, it also got some really interesting threads that were then able to take the place of networking that was frankly missing. And then finally, we did, as Carrie mentioned, talk about the ecosystem partners. This was something that we wanted to do. We've been wanting to do. A lot of times I think we all talk to each other about how can we partner, and it's great. You spread my social media kit and I'll spread yours. We really wanted to dive in and say, no, let's make space for one and all. It helped us with content. It helped them with content. It helped us with audience. And then from that point, we're better able to continue to grow and allow more and more people into that tent. Because like anyone, there's a definite crew that comes and has come for a few years. We call them, the converted. And so if we're really going to do the level of social change that we need to, and one of the beautiful pieces of the virtual platform was it enabled us, one, to give greater access to those who historically weren't able to come because it was out of pocket, was pretty expensive, or timing wasn't able to get away for that length of time. And secondly, really encourage us from the US base to start having a global conversation. We've done a lot talking about the US, but anyway. So Kara, anything else that I'm missing?
I would say the other piece of that, kind of piggybacking on top of the attendance piece, is the inclusion. We really saw that we were able to have much deeper inclusion from not only more countries and speakers being able to be a part of that, but I would also say we were able to see deeper inclusion around voice and community voice and representative voice. And I think that is one of the really key and important parts, that we have had that as a cornerstone of our work, and particularly as part of our content, but we were truly able to see that for the first time in, I think, a very significant way. And so that is still one of my main takeaways on the audience participation side.
Right. Marketing, we started, I mean, these are a lot of speeds and feeds. We did a lot of nuanced in terms of, pricing, played around with pricing. We started in May. I will say it was a nail biter. It always, as everybody knows in general, is usually a nail biter. And we usually get something about, a large chunk of the ticket sales usually come in the last, 2 weeks or the last month. But here it was closer to like 60 to 75% of the tickets came in. Now we also had, and we grandfathered in all of the ticket purchases that had been happening in January. That was one of the things I was going to say is by January 31st, we had already surpassed, this is when we were doing in person, we'd already surpassed our March 2019, our numbers. We were so far ahead. So it was very fortunate for us because that enabled us, that gave us a bit of a buffer that we were able to frankly function off of while we got ourselves realigned. It's still hard to track actions by partners, something we need to look at. We did have an excellent conversion rate from the SOCAP specific newsletter list. We had about a 10 to 12% conversion. And I'm just looking at the time. If we want to stay on, we probably have to keep moving. Sponsor revenue, everyone wants to know. I did the majority. Carrie helped in a few key with some larger foundations that she has some great relationships with. Total number, we had 20 versus 34. To me, the key piece was upselling, as random as that may seem, and really thinking in more lines of a campaign, an annualized program, which is where having other attributes such as either podcasts or creating new forms of content, such as the Radical Collaboration webinar series that we've done, the SOCAP Next series that we've done, or taking a look at total impact and some interesting, audience specific, and building out a larger program that people found valuable. The key thing that I thought was really interesting was while we had fewer, because of that upselling bit, we were able to maintain the average sponsorship yield, despite the fact that we had fewer. So, and then we really upped the game because we were going in, everyone was going in. So who knows what the heck we're doing. And so we held hands pre, during, and then post. And regardless of what the size is, I'm actually doing debrief calls with every single sponsor. And then we're going to take that back, and that's going to help inform what we're going to create for next year. And then next slide. All right, Care, why don't you take the lead on the content piece?
Sure. So SOCAP Open, we continue to use that as one of our cornerstones for building content, which is community driven. We received 350 SOCAP Open submissions this year, and we brought in 76. So we did still do a majority of our content through SOCAP Open, and they were under these 10 themes. The themes come from doing a lot of listening tours, attending a lot of events, speaking with a number of the thought leaders in the space, and then also really taking a look at the SOCAP Open submissions and the content that comes in from there. We kind of do a final tweak on those themes before we launch. And so these were our themes for this year. And what we did find is that in terms of takeaways, we in SOCAP is known for this, of always having more content than at any given time that is competing. So in the future, we will do less content, and we actually tried to do less content this year, but we continued to find that there were pieces of content that we needed to pull in that were not represented. And so that's kind of our trickiness will be to figure out how to balance the community-driven content with the other content that is a piece of that push and pull that we know hey, we need to be able to have a conversation around this, particularly around these themes, and then balancing that in the future. And that I would say goes less content, or less is more, goes to being able to provide the year-round content. I think the other beautiful thing that happened with virtual is that we were able to record everything, which we've never been able to do before. And so folks who did miss content, they can still go back now and see it. And that is something that we're seeing is a question of how we might replicate that in the future.
And just really
and then
quick.
Yes, pre-recording is a really significant piece that I think we should all try to think on. And what does that mean for audience engagement and participation? But really, and then I think we're going to get into the production side, it's really helps the production side considerably. The production is smoother. We know that we're not working with connectivity issues at any given time, specifically knowing that we have people coming in from all over the world, and even here in the US, that still don't have great connectivity. That pre-record is, I think, an essential piece, but we have to then figure out how to balance perhaps the expectations of attendees, that not everything is going to be live. And that's something that we're still in conversation and trying to balance for next year.
Yeah, and I would say with Brightest Spice of Life,
Kate, you're on mute.
That's okay. There's been science, 2.5 hours worth of content is about what the human brain can take. So keep that in mind. With the pre-record as well, that's where the chat moderation comes in, really is very key. I just think you can offset that pre-record feel and really keep it much more dynamic. And it also makes for speakers being shockingly more comfortable. And it helps overcome people's firewalls, which we had a lot. Okay, production, go for it.
Yes, sorry, I lost audio there, so I couldn't hear, but I'm pretty sure I know where you went, so thank you. We did decide to go with 2 platforms. One of the things that we found is, unfortunately, there is no one platform yet to rule them all. And so we did a combination of Hopin and Bizzabo. And then, of course, we also ended up using Zoom for some of our breakout sessions to really enable greater participation that way. And a real reason of why we chose 2 platforms is because we knew we wanted to create a specific experience. So we knew we wanted to have the chat feature of Hopin, which is incredible. We knew we wanted the agenda portion of Bizzabo, which is dynamic and fantastic. And Hopin at the time did not have a great agenda portion. Hopin is continuing, and so is Bizzabo, continuing to upgrade their features all the time. And then with Bizzabo, we had actually decided that we were going to have them as our original platform, and they started having significant connectivity issues. So we made a pivot very late in the game, in August, actually late August, to Hopin fully. And so these are some of those production things within virtual. You think you've created a path for yourselves, and then you really do have to work with what starts to show up. And I think as more and more people started to get into these platforms, we just had some significant challenges. And we were extremely lucky to have 2 incredible production folks on our team. And our technical director was watching all of this connectivity for us on a regular basis. And that was how we made some decisions, but it was really tough. And it did make, I believe, some of the delivery of SOCAP not as smooth as we would want it to be. And it's absolutely something that we will continue to look at for next year, because it was clunky to have the 2. And we know that we needed the 2 at the time. And I'm really hopeful that there will become a platform to rule them all in the next couple of months.
And with that, we should be on time.
Great. Thanks, Carrie and Kate. Did everyone catch all that? everything they said? You caught all that? Probably not. So I'm going to put the link to the presentation so you can catch all the details. We have the presentation available for you so you can look at that. We have a couple other things left in the call. We have a connection where we just want folks to get together and just talk about what you just heard. You also have some time to talk to Kate and Carrie and ask some questions very specifically. And really what we want you to do in the breakout rooms is really talk about what surprised you about the data and insights that you learned from the SOCAP team. So if you give me just a moment, I will get you all whisked away into breakout rooms. You should see a prompt to join the breakout room, and I'll see you all back here shortly. Welcome back.
Whoops, sorry. I popped out of my group mid conversation. And so maybe that's something that we could dig into a little bit in the Q&A when we get there.
No
They
problem.
had a lot of questions about Hopin overall. And if that's something that is a general thing, we could definitely dig in there.
That sounds great. Yeah, I just invited everyone back. So looks like they're all joining us. So welcome back, everyone. I know that was really quick, but the rest of the call will be time for you to ask Kate and Carrie some questions. Before we dive in, I want to just remind you all that we do have a feedback survey. We'd love to hear any of your thoughts on today's call. But now that we are back, I will stop sharing my screen, and I encourage you, if you have questions, to take yourself off mute, turn on your camera, or place them in the chat. But what questions do you have for Kate and Carrie about SOCAP 2020? And I'll start with one only because I saw it in the chat before we left, and I saw Kate respond to it. But there was a question around languages, and Kate, I heard that you said you had some thoughts around that. And the question was, how did you present the conference in other languages? And it sounds like it was just in English. So Kate, do you have any feedback on that?
Well, actually, I was going to let Carrie, because she had some more specific. I've got a few, but
I think there are a couple of things. We did decide to have the universal language as English. In the future, one of the things that I would really like for us to do is to have more salons or networking sessions that are done by regions that would allow for not only connections more broadly within that region, so Latin America and Asia and Africa, or Southern Africa and Eastern Africa, that we could really start to create some of those types of combinations that would happen in languages that are also able to be translated. However, it's that translation piece that we definitely need to figure out a better way forward, and some closed captioning. That also doesn't happen on Hopin. So we would have needed to bring in a separate translation, third-party translation piece that, having pivoted so late in the game back to Hopin, we did not have the ability to bring in this year.
And also, we want to figure out a way to help the just hearing impaired, because that was something that is really important. We've always provided that. I know many on the call have done the same thing, and that is, something that we're looking to as well. And also other ways for us to share SOCAP content. So, the big question everyone's having is, will you be in person next year? So, it's going to be an unsatisfactory answer. Maybe. I'm more inclined to say, honestly, probably not. But what we might do is we might figure out a way to do viewing parties with folks around the world. And that could also help do this whole notion of global. So having global conversations, we would provide either live stream or a SOCAP module, if you will, that would then participate in another country's event that they're doing. And then they could afterwards go and continue to have their own conversations. So we're looking at all sorts of other things. Or we could do a smaller version, a smaller in-person version as well. So looking at different ways, getting a little creative. What should that look like? What's even the appetite, frankly?
And we will have to make some decisions around production fairly early, and whether or not we would be able to make those production decisions, really by February, and what the landscape looks like in February. And yes, we'll have vaccines, but how do we, we don't even know if in a physical setting, like, will we have to take temperatures? Will we have to be doing all of these other types of pieces? And I think those are some of the things that would preclude us more than likely from doing, our larger event together this fall. But in smaller numbers, that could very possibly be something that we could do, and we could take on.
Yeah. So we're not meaning to be coy, just incredibly real-time honest.
Yeah.
Kat has her hand raised with a question.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this. I have a couple of questions for you. One, I was just curious to learn more about ecosystem partners and the theory behind that, how it worked, how you implemented, what that looked like. So just want to learn more there. The other question was really around this data that you were looking at that was really telling you that people nestled in and were listening. I'm just wondering, we've all been there watching, but really not watching, on our email. So how are you really knowing and quantifying and understanding the engagement levels of your participants and inspiring those engagement levels? And related to that, did you utilize this as an opportunity to do evaluation work on kind of engagement in an online setting? And what were you monitoring? What were you looking at from a data perspective?
Let's just start with the networking, and then we can dive into the data, because that's a big, chewy, juicy one. So the networking partners really was looking at, there are some, larger entities who had always been longtime participants of SOCAP, right? Or had done it around us. And we had known that it was going to be hard. They weren't going to be able to have the means to do it. So what we did is we chose some in the investment community, some in the global, as in, small giants in the global investment community. We spoke to, sort of I would say our historic 15 closest, so net impact, so that we got the up and comer, that next generation group involved. Nexus, working on, again, looking at next generation philanthropy. Then also literally just looking at the different voices in the space and the different fragments of the ecosystem, of the landscape. And then going to the folks that we knew there and said, hey, and offering it up, B Labs for the for corporates and up and coming corporations. So what we then did was we had a whole value. We'd always done marketing partnerships, but we stepped it up, which included there was a discount that we gave them for their audience for tickets. And then we also provided, the platform that they could do the content on. And then we did some joint marketing as well. So those were kind of those benefits. And what was interesting and what we learned there was, it was a lot. I mean, to the point Carrie pointed out, we had 244 sessions, 50 of those were day one, non-SOCAP. So that meant, oh my gosh, everything we were doing for SOCAP, we had to do for them as well. So including additional people. What was beautiful was we reached out and said, hey, look, would you be willing to help us for the rest of the week? So the folks that they were getting to help and their staffs then helped become monitors at our different sessions, which was really, for me, kind of a kumbaya cool moment. I thought that's the beauty and that's what we're going for, I think. The more we can do that. Data, seriously, Kat, really good question. We are just now we're building a dashboard. I have a meeting today at 2:00 to take a look at it. And think about, what is it we're looking at right now. What we're able to do is see kind of basic, not unlike Google Analytics, who showed up, how long did they stay? We're measuring engagement right now, looking at it as, okay, how long did they stay? And chat. And that's right. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Do we need to do more? Yep. And I think that could be a really interesting conversation for this group, like having a call all about measurement of engagement and that, the key thing that I was talking about in my breakout was, this notion of networking. How do we overcome that? What does that networking piece look like? Or what does it look like online? And I think that obviously that connection and that connectivity piece would be something that I think we could also do a big deep dive in. But YouTube too. Okay, I'll stop.
No, and I guess just to add into that, I would say that we're also hearing from people, whether it was in our like happy hour that we had right at the end, or other people's happy hours and surveys, and also just anecdotally as we start to talk to more people, that the chat feature was also a shortcut into people finding a way to connect with each other. And they felt like they had a better connection with people than they might at a physical conference, because they were able to interact with folks in this way. Then they could reach out, as opposed to not knowing who they were at all in a sea of people when you're walking around. And so that may have been for newcomers. What I don't know that we have the data for is that, folks who have been coming to SOCAP for a really long time, was that something that helped them connect in different ways. But I think we're definitely hearing from folks who are either new to SOCAP or maybe more introverted, that they really enjoyed that chat feature because it helped them do networking in different ways.
And it also helped the sponsors do networking in different ways too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And in the debrief call I had yesterday, in fact, I came up with an interesting new idea of something we could do moving forward. And so what I was saying, also in talking to the sponsors in this template, and I'll be happy to share, I'll send it to Ray, he can send it out. But it's, to providing what our, SOCAP overall was, what your specific session is. That I think that debrief doc in and of itself is extraordinary value add. Mm-hmm. Because we give assets away, right? And that's one of the things we each can give our speakers and each of our, sponsors. Everyone's looking for content. And Carrie brought up the point that we pre-recorded everything. A video asset is a lot, because it can be cut down to so many different things. So I really recommend people think about that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the things, we didn't pre-record everything, but we were able to record all of our sessions. We did have a few sessions that were pre-recorded.
No, I meant record. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's just, and the recording piece, this is the other thing that I will, be really honest about. because we get a data dump of everything in this gigantic, Hopin sends you like this full data thing. It takes a long time to get through those sessions and get them back up and out to our partners, to our speakers and presenters. And we will definitely resource for that differently in the future, because it is a gigantic lift, and it's a tremendous value add. And we're still very dedicated to ensuring that this content gets up and out and is shared, not only with our speakers and partners, but then also more and more people. Because truly, to be the big tent, what we want is for more people to be able to interact with this content so that they are starting to do and act differently.
Carrie and Kate, thank you. And I want to be mindful of time. We have two other folks with questions. Jess, Flutie, do you want to ask your question next? And then we'll have Ariel next.
Great, thanks. Super helpful. And I think you started to touch on this, but you know, at the School Foundation and the School World Forum, we always think of our event, our flagship event, as sort of a connection first event, and that, you know, in some ways the content is a vehicle to just bring people together, because that's where we see the impact happening. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just curious, you know, in the virtual setting, if there were particular formats or functionalities that you found really useful in driving that networking and connections, or if there were even analog tools that you sort of used off platform to help foster those connections.
I will say this is really interesting. So Impact Assets did a happy hour in their booth, in their Hopin booth. And it got like 100 to 120 people or 150 people, which virtually, hello. And they did a terrific job. We're writing up a case study about it. To see, you know, what they did and how they kind of made that happen. And I think we want to do even more on this front, but I think there's an opportunity for all of us to take a look at, as folks are coming in, meaning as we're starting to get the audience, we're starting to see who's coming. Maybe, you know, taking a look and thinking a little bit, kind of like what Kat was asking about. How do we take that data and then how do we make, hey, you know what, pre-event introductions? You two might find something that would be helpful, or you two are interested in this, or, you know, and so being a better conduit, a better connector, if you will. So I think there's a huge opportunity. That is not something that we've historically done. We're not necessarily staffed to do that. So maybe there would be some other ways that we could incorporate other folks to help us do that.
Mm-hmm. I would also say that I've been hearing that the people who did the one-on-one feature within Hopin, where it's just like you randomly press that, they found that was one of the best connection pieces that they had the entire conference. And the more they went back and did that they were somehow just finding the correct people that were needed. The other piece that we did a little bit late in the game, and I think this is something that we have to figure out as well, but we opened up a lounge specifically for main stage conversations right after the main stage portion ended. And there was a lot of great conversation that was happening in there. And so I would say that we would, and Hopin has a start your own session feature that we turned off for SOCAP, but we had for Spectrum, the conference that we did in June. And I would say that some of those features of being able to kind of create your own spaces on the fly that you can bring others into, or creating more of these lounges that provide for different types of connections, which we had, and some of them were used and some weren't. But I think if we're connecting them to content in different ways, that's a better feature, and that's where a lot of really great conversation was happening, and frankly some tension-based conversation, which is again also what we want and need. And that kind of goes back to some of the engagement as well. Like we knew that people were engaged because that was the level of conversation and connection that was happening in different areas.
Yeah. And we did have also the speaker lounge that people went back, and that was a very powerful access point for a number of people.
Great. We have time for one more question. Ariel, do you want to say your question out loud, or do you want me to read it?
Yeah, sure. So, sorry, it might be a slightly sensitive question, so it's okay if you can't answer it. But we just finished up our global summit focused on the Global South in the first week of November, and was just wondering, around ticket pricing. So, I think we're all trying to figure out virtual ticket pricing. What's the value that people really associate with virtual pricing? I know you guys reduced your prices significantly from the in-person event. We also did. And we thought we were going to get a lot more people. And I think what we saw and what you saw is we ended up with the same number of people. So ticket revenues actually dropped some, right? So would just be curious to hear if you had a similar experience and what your thinking is for virtual pricing. And, are we doing ourselves a disservice by thinking we should be charging less? Yeah, just curious to hear your thoughts.
It's a great question. And my answer is yes. We thought, frankly, we were like, come on, everyone's going to come. Woo. And they didn't. Now, one of the reasons, why did that happen? It's interesting that it happened for you as well, because part of our thinking was, well, gosh, it was so early. And, we started asking early, and now it's well into the year. And so everybody zoomed out? What's going on? I believe, coming from a traditional media background, my concern is always undercutting ourselves, right? And so I'm very curious about other ways that we can, deliver value and demonstrating that we're doing value. So the content, yes, but beefing up that connection, beefing up those networking pieces. I think if we do more of that, then we'll be able to charge more, and I think people will come, because then it'll be more familiar to what they had been getting, and it goes beyond listening, which is extraordinary. Don't get me wrong. That's always going to be, very valuable. But I think demonstrating that we're offering access and an introduction and a content that's going to result in something other than just, feeding your mind, but resulting in something else. We right now literally are trying to figure out what we're going to do with pricing. We had a meeting yesterday, and it's something that we're going to take a look at. In an instance with us, we have multiple, we have a few events. So the question then becomes, what do we do with that? Is there something interesting along those lines where we, do some bulk pricing? I know Missy worked at the Summit series. They're doing some interesting pricing. So we're kind of poking around and seeing, I don't want to say membership, but something along those lines, that kind of thinking. So again, broader based.
Carrie and Kate, thank you so much for your time today. What I love about this community is that folks are so generous, and especially with their time. And I'll say that Kate is one of the busiest people I know, yet she still made herself available to keep in touch. So if you didn't get your question answered today, Kate has made herself available. And so please do keep in touch with Kate if you have questions, and also keep in touch with conveners.org. We have a feedback survey. We certainly encourage you to complete that, to let us know how we did, whether you enjoyed the call or things that can change, things you want to see in the future. That will be very helpful. And we hope to see you in January, where we'll have a similar conversation about the year of COVID-19, and we'll be speaking with our friends at Skoll. Jess will be on that call. So thank you all so much for joining. If you have any last comments, feel free to drop those in the chat. But we look forward to seeing you. And thanks again, Kate and Carrie, for both of your time.
Great. Our pleasure. Thank you. Good luck, everybody. Stay healthy, and happy holidays.
Yeah, take care, everyone.
Great to see you all.